Oh, I hope it's a brain tumor. I hope it's cancer, because you can fight that. Or please bless it's MS, because you can live with that. You can manage it. There's a chance. And no doctor even utters the word or the possibility ALS unless they know it's a diagnosis. We both had separate, spiritual sort of confirmations of like, this is coming, and be ready.
So why I wanted you to come here, because one, you're amazing, but two, you have gone through what some people would think would be the worst thing that can happen to them.
Yeah, I think it's the worst thing, but
yeah.
I know people have it worse.
Yeah.
I mean, I do.
Yeah.
I do.
But I mean, you, and I never knew Chris, which is so sad.
That makes me so sad
I know,
for you.
because
Like sincerely,
Yeah.
like not in a jokey way, but like you would have loved him. He would have loved you.
Yeah. We had a good time. I know this because every story I hear, I'm like, his humor is hilarious.
Oh,
He's so funny.
So funny.
Yeah. I feel like I missed out. We have eternity though.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think that's how it works.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think that's how it works.
I'm going to bet on that one.
Okay, good. I love it.
But you spoke to a group a little while ago about suffering and how you dealt with it. And before we started recording, I was telling you that in our culture, there seems to be this like overtone of like, let's escape any discomfort. Mm-hmm. Let's numb quickly, and let's not tackle anything real. And that's not everyone, but I'm just saying that seems to be an easy thing to do, is to numb out and not like question.
Yeah, we want to rush through it.
We rush through it, or just push it away, or act like it doesn't happen. Let's save that. Let's heal that another day. Mm-hmm. And I think that you have, and you can disagree with me, I think you've done this beautifully. I mean, in a way that you have inspired so many people around you with, one, how you pay tribute to him and how you supported him through the end of his life, and then how you've taken such like the worst thing that could happen to you, and with Christ, he makes beauty from ashes, right? Mm-hmm. And I know that I'm just glossing over this whole thing, but I want you to start. And I'm interested in, he passed away honorably, and he did.
I'm so proud of him.
Yeah. I'm proud of him too. I don't know him, but I love how you describe this. Do you want to just give us some background, how it led up to that, and then we'll go from there?
Yeah, you bet.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I'm talking too much.
Christopher is larger than life, and everybody who knew him loved him. Mm-hmm. And I hate it when, before we started recording, we're talking a little bit about science fiction and my love for science fiction. Yeah. And one thing that like Orson Scott Card does really well on Speaker for the Dead is talk about how we just say the most beautiful things about the dead as if they were, perfect. And the thing I like about Christopher and how he wants to be remembered was it was just like for the real, for who he really was, and he had an opportunity to, write his own life story and leave it for, his friends and family. And
hold on, he had ALS. How did he write that?
Okay, so let me back up. So he, larger than life, theater director, actor, funny guy, family man.
He was legendary. Like I knew of him.
Just always doing a million things and doing them well and just quirky and fun, and life with him was really interesting and fun and meaningful. And in the fall of 2015, he noticed like a slight drag in his leg. Like, oh, this is weird. Like my my leg just seems to be taking a second from like the time that I tell it to like walk or something. I was like, well, that's weird. Just drink a glass of water.
How old was he at the time?
Take an ibuprofen. Like I was a real loving wife. I was like, you're fine. Yeah. We have 5 kids. Yeah. You're going, you know what I mean? Like we have 2 full-time jobs. Like okay. Yeah. At the time, let's see, because he was 47 when he passed. So he was 42, 43.
That's so young. I'm 41. I'll be 42 this year. Or this coming year. And
so I was like, oh, it'll be fine. But it kept getting worse and worse. And so he had gotten a back surgery in his 20s, like quite early. It was just kind of a thing in his family line. Like, everybody gets back surgery in your 20s. So I was like, you probably need a tune-up. So it's probably that. And so we didn't really worry that much about it. Went to go get the MRI. It was totally clean. And we were like, like, your back looks great. So we got another MRI a little bit further up, like for his neck. And that was clean, and the symptoms were getting worse, and he was walking with a noticeable limp. And then everybody got a little concerned, all the doctors and everything. And we went through a lot of tests and testing. There's no definitive test for ALS. You just rule out everything else. So it's like, I hope it's a brain tumor. I hope it's cancer because you can fight that. Or, please bless it's MS because you can live with that. You can manage it. There's a chance. And no doctor even utters the word or the possibility ALS unless they know it's a diagnosis. And so they weren't saying it. We got his blood tested. We had scans, everything. It was coming clean. We weren't telling anybody about it. And that was just a horrible, awful time of not knowing what it was to finally, so 4 months later, he was like, I just need to know what this is. I'll be so relieved even if it's the worst. And, we both had separate, spiritual sort of confirmations of like, this is coming and be ready.
Like the worst is coming?
The worst is coming and you need to be prepared for it. And we kept getting the tests. And then finally, I could tell you all the details from that. It's pretty unremarkable until we went to the ALS clinic in the Department of Neurology at the University of Utah, which is one of the best in the country. And a very kind doctor said, hey, we're going to stop testing and we're going to make you comfortable. And we were like, what do you mean make you comfortable? We want to fight. And there's just nothing to fight. There's no cure. There's no treatment. It's really the worst disease because they just want to make you comfortable. And you're like, well, so how fast is this going to progress from walking with a cane to a wheelchair to not being able to talk to, like how fast? And they're like, I don't know. Every question that you have that you feel is a really important question. Nobody knows. And then that starts to sink in. So it's a lot of like little mini losses of hope and devastation with every new day. But one thing that the doctor did say is that every day is going to be the very best and healthiest that you will ever be.
Oh, wow.
Like it will get worse. And the average life expectancy is 2 to 5 years. We were hoping, I remember thinking that like my youngest at the time was 8. And I was like, I hope if he just has the slow progressing one and if he could last for 10 years, then at least she could be grown. At least like you just like your brain does these weird,
these mind contracts.
You make these and then the circumstances are like, oh, I don't care about your intent. But I realize, further along as I'm living with grief longer and longer that your brain does that to try to soothe you and protect you. It tries to, to tell you all these things. Christopher went from a slight limp in his leg to not being able to move or talk and just kind of being able to move a thumb to click on a mouse. He had that like sort of Stephen Hawking, for lack of a better description, set up where he was in a chair with a screen in front of him with some glasses that just had a magnetic dot so that he could type out things, click on it, uncommonly used phrases and things like that. And then he was able to communicate that for about the last 2 years of his life. He lived with ALS for 4.5 years and then died on June 5th in 2020 during the height of the pandemic.
Wonderful time on Earth.
Wonderful.
Wasn't it? Yeah, it's such an easy time
when you could just be with friends and family. No, it was the worst. Anyway, so yeah.
Okay. Well,
that's a little bit about.
Gosh, there's so much.
There's so much in there. I don't know. Yeah, where you want me to.
Okay.
Detour.
Well, let's talk about. I mean, I'm interested, and I would just respect how you talked about how he still served. He still joked. He still.
Oh man.
He wasn't a victim. I mean,
no.
not that there wasn't hard days. I'm sure there was. Where you go into victimhood, but I mean, overall, I would love for you to tell me how he.
Yeah,
did this.
I had this feeling. When he died, I was so proud of him. I was like, you did it. Like you did this with dignity and love and not anger and not jealousy. And which is not to say that he didn't feel those things. And of course he did but he got to a point, especially in the last 9 months of his life, where he was just happy for every day that he just was there because he felt like it was a bonus day for him that he didn't think he was going to get. And I remember thinking very, very clearly after he passed, like moments after he passed, like we should all live like this all the time. We think that we have so much time to work things out, but this is how we should all be all the time. I just was so inspired by that. But sort of to back up, the beginning was the hardest because you're trying to like do all of this bargaining. You know, the stages of grief are for a dying person. They're not for someone who, like me, is watching someone you love die, or you know, our friends or family. It's for that person. And at first, it was really, really hard. There were things that we couldn't talk about with each other. They just seemed too big and too overwhelming. Like, what happens when I die, or what happens in the last moments, or what, like, how do I want my kids to remember me? Like, oh, like big stuff like that you just don't want to talk about when it seems like a reality and it's not just a hypothetical. But he went to go see a really good therapist, and you know, I would be like, well, what did you talk about? Well, what did you say? Because we were used to just telling each other things. And it was so interesting where he was like, I just needed a place where like he wasn't worried about my feelings, like, because he was worried about me, and which is so sweet. Like, he's still trying to care for me, but I'm like, no, this is like go time. But he needed that place, and he saw a therapist regularly for about a year, and then afterwards, he's like, I think I'm at peace with this. I'm not fighting it. It's not that I don't have hard days. There were little losses. Like, I remember the day that he tried to mow his lawn and he couldn't mow his lawn anymore because the lawnmower was going too fast.
Oh, no.
And that was like a regular Saturday where we were like still in hopeful mode. We were still in like, well, you know, a doctor out of this country said that if we take this supplement, that, I mean, you never know. Maybe we could be the one. For the first year, we were like, you know, you sort of get away with a lot of stuff. You're kind of a golden child. So, of course, if anyone was going to find a cure to an incurable disease,
Clark.
it's probably you.
Yeah.
And then we'll, you know, bless the world. Like, we'll do good things with it. Like, we were still living in that world, and that's why it was so hard. Little moments like that, or the day that he couldn't play the piano anymore. He used to be like a concert pianist, and he was like, nope, I'm not going to do. He was at peace with that, and I was really upset about that. So, like, little tiny things like that would come up on a regular Tuesday, and you'd be like, ugh. But after that year mark, I remember we had a really good talk, and he said, I'm switching my mind frame about all of this, because he's like, I have a terminal disease and I'm going to die. There's no out charming this, out working it out, you know? And he really had this great relationship, I think, with God, where he was like, he'd read his patriarchal blessing and he would study and think about it. And then he'd say, you know, I didn't do anything to deserve this. I don't feel like I'm being punished. I think this is just my life's story. And so that's different than feeling like, what did I do wrong? Or I was robbed, or my life was cut short. He's like, this was what it was supposed to be, so I'm just going to try to do it as best I can. And as his abilities, his physical abilities, like decreased, whether that was, again, at first it was hard. Like he wanted to walk with a walker for a while and still drive, which he could, until he fell one time and blacked out. And we were like, you're falling, you have to go into a wheelchair. And it was it was a total paradigm shift. When we were talking to a lot of our doctors, they said, you know, all of these adaptive equipments, the wheelchair, the power chair, the speech device, the big foam grippers for your utensils, all this stuff that you're like, oh, that makes me look special and I don't want to use it. All of this is to help you live your life with ease and comfort, and to spend more time with your family. In fact, I remember a doctor said, and there's a spiritual application here, I really do think. Okay, you don't want to be in a wheelchair, even though you can still walk, to prove to people you're okay, but you're working 5 times as hard trying to do that when you could conserve energy and be more alert and aware if somebody was pushing you in a wheelchair, and have more time to like actually live your life, go to work and do the things you want to do, like be creative. And that's when I think it clicked for him, because the rest of the time he was like, oh, I was so resistant to use the wheelchair. And then when I did, it made my life so much easier and so much better. And he's like, we're so resistant sometimes to ask for help that we think we don't need, because we're afraid of what it will mean or what it will view to other people. But he's like, I finally got over myself, and then life got easier. And so, you asked earlier about how did he write his book and stuff. Before his, then the focus, instead of like, I just want to keep living and pretend like I don't have this, became, how can I live with this and get the most out of the days? And I remember I was asking him in a really like tender moment, like, what do you want more than, what can I do to make your life like meaningful and happy? He says, I just want ordinary days. I just want days where like I'm laughing with my friends and I'm teasing my kids and that we're just all hanging out, just ordinary days. And so then that became the focus. And he just did a really good job of being able to do that. He recorded his life story on audio with one of his cousins. Jane had done the same thing for their grandma. And she's like, I want a book like that. So she would interview him. And by the time he couldn't speak anymore or his speech was unintelligible, it was all done. They had taken 1.5 years to kind of write that like once a week for about an hour and were able to finish it. So then he had this speech device that he was learning how to use with his eyes and his movement so he could edit it and add things and correct things and make it what he really wanted. But he just kept moving from like creative product to creative product and focusing on what he could do instead of what he couldn't do anymore.
Wow,
it's really inspirational to me.
Yeah, he's such an artist. That is so cool. One of the stories you told about was how he set up, was it an anniversary dinner?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of the coolest things I've ever heard in my life.
Oh, it's one of the coolest things that ever happened to me.
How do you orchestrate that?
Okay.
And what stage was he in?
So he was dying, actively dying, as in it was the last 2 days of his life.
Oh, I didn't know it was that close.
He was hiding it from everyone. We were hiding it, which was really easy because everything was shut down in the pandemic. When everything shut down in the pandemic, he was in the final stages. He told me, it feels like the light went out inside. And I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean? And he's like, I don't know. There's just a shift inside my body that I can't explain any other way than that. And a hospice nurse was like, oh, I hear that all the time. It's like your body it's like when you turn off the lights to go to bed and you put your house to bed and you go to each room and you turn off all the lights and you lock the doors. It's like you go from system to system and lock everything down. Your body like can feel it. So
that's so symbolically sad to me. Just tragic.
So
it's just like,
and he's communicating this to me, by typing. And so he's spending a lot of time sleeping more. He's spending all of his time on his trilogy machine. He has a feeding tube by now. He's in his chair. He can't move. He's lost a lot of weight. He's, he looks, and we'd gotten so good. I had gotten so good at like anticipating his needs. Like, okay, now this. And when you get to it, like, oh no, there's nothing. Oh, this is it. Oh, this is the end. Even though you know it's coming and that he has a terminal disease, you're shocked. So that's where we are, if I can paint a beautiful picture.
Okay.
And then I was like, we had lots of therapists to help us and CNAs to like pick him up and shower him and move him and bathe him. And like he needed he could not be alone. And then the pandemic shut everything down and everyone had to go home. And so it was me and my oldest son, Miles.
How old's he at this point?
So he's 21 at this point.
Okay, so he's strong.
So yes, and but I'm like, we were like, we don't want you to worry about, like, you should be in college having fun, and not. And he was like, this is my dad.
Yeah.
And then we were like, this is not what we wanted for you. And he was like, this is my dad. So from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. I would care for him, and then from 10 p.m. to 10 a.m. Miles would, and we would be with them. And so then I would sleep and then get up and go to work and then come home and take care of business, and it was an intense time, and he started, the last thing to go, how you die from ALS, is your lungs. All your muscles atrophy. So your ability to take a deep breath is, so it was slowly happening, and he was starting to have panic attacks because he couldn't, because of course he was. And so I was administering emergency meds, and we were trying to, and the hospice nurse was saying, this is cruel. He's having it. Let's put him on a morphine drip so that his body needs to relax. And we were like, no, we know what that means. A morphine drip means that he's going to go to sleep and never wake up. And she's like, yeah, this means that his body's going to do what it's going to do, but without panicking. Anyway, so these were the conversations that we were having. And it just so happened that it was coming up on our 25th wedding anniversary. And he always did something really nice. We are planning the next day. Our anniversary is on the 3rd of June. He orchestrated that one of my friends would come over and do this outside because, again, pandemic, and cater a dinner for me because, he can't eat food. And I mean, I'm describing this and I still can't believe that he did this. And he coordinated that our good friends, Jenny and Blake Barlow, who he did all these theatrical productions with. She's a director and choreographer. He's like, transform our backyard into like a big Italian restaurant with all these plants and these huge inflatable, like silver balls. Like it looked top notch because it's our silver anniversary. Our brother-in-law made me a silver bracelet. We got Ryan Innes to come and sing.
Ryan Innes came? Oh,
yes,
awesome.
to come and sing to us.
Very cool.
And he walked in the backyard and he's like, I did not know what I was walking into. And I was like, I am so sorry. And he sang to us while we just cried and cried. And he had written me this card or had this for our anniversary. He had made Miles. He had just had a panic attack. We'd got him ready and he's like, wake me up. He typed out on his phone, wake me up at 7 for our special surprise. And I was like, we're not doing any special, surprise. He's like, just laughing, like, we'll see. He wore like this silver tie. I had Miles get him all ready. It was just overwhelming. So he said, just go put on a nice dress and meet me in the backyard. We had this I just remember eating, going, it's just really good.
Crying in the noodles.
Looking at my friend Josh, who made the dinner, and I'm like, what is happening? He's like, I don't know. We just do whatever Chris says. Yeah. I was like, it was insane, but also just so sweet and so indicative of him, of like, let's just have a nice night. So that was our 25th wedding anniversary. And then after Ryan stopped singing and we were all just beside ourselves, he's like, okay, no more crying. I need to lay down. I was like, okay. Because, he'd been up for about an hour and that was as long as he could really do. And then, I read him a card that I had written on our first anniversary. And we had a really sweet moment. And then woke up the next morning and put him on the morphine drip. And then he died on the day after.
Oh my gosh. So, thank you for sharing all these.
Yeah. It's
hard.
Although it's
memories.
like emotional, isn't that lovely?
I mean,
it's
what a way to go out. So,
I'm just so glad we have that moment. It was a really great thing to show our kids.
Oh my gosh.
And he just said, I don't know, that he was thinking about me and our anniversary, which I kept telling him, oh my gosh, you just have to worry about living. Like, you don't have to, I'm fine. I'm not a princess. You don't have to do anything. But he's like, I want to do this. Yeah.
It's so cool.
Cool.
For me, look, I love the stories like Braveheart or the guys that are just like dying, but they're still like their causes.
Yes.
And I just respect Chris so much because it is so easy for him to just sleep and right. But I can't imagine how hard that would have been to communicate behind your back to orchestrate.
I know, he was texting people.
And he must have known he was going to pass away in a couple of days, right?
Oh, he knew.
Yeah.
In fact, my brother-in-law, Andrew Beasley, who did the bracelet,
right
don't you love him? He's the best. He said to me, look at this, later, after everything, look at this text. Cause I was like, oh my gosh, you came right over. And he's like, how could I not look at this text that I got from Chris? And it was like, hey, it's my silver anniversary and I need to get Lisa a bracelet. It's my last anniversary, so I can't F it up. He's like, so no pressure, but it has to be good because it's my last one. And I just was like, he's like, who types that? And I'm like, Chris.
How does he? Okay, so I know he's an amazing man. I knew about him. He was legendary in the Valley. How does someone get to the point where they die with such dignity and accept this stuff? Like, what had he done in his life? What type of relationship do you have with God? Like, what did he believe about himself to get to that point? Because that's not something we naturally do.
Yeah.
When something really hard happens.
I mean, he did have a deep, a conversion to Christ. He attributes that he got really on his mission.
Okay.
He went to Finland. It was dark all the time. People were mean to him.
I've been to Finland. It is dark.
People tried to kill him.
Oh, wow.
Like, do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And he was in some dangerous situations and stuff. And he was just like, what are we doing? What is this? And he really had to choose, and he did. And he loved that. And he was always, he was on a theater scholarship, but like but majored in English because he thought it was more practical. And then when he had the career and we were making, good money, we had 2 little kids and like the most money we'd ever made. And it was like nothing, but we were like, this is the life. He was like, I hate my job and I want to study Shakespeare. And I was like, let's do it. So we moved to England and got a master's degree, and we had no money, and we had these little kids, and it was so much fun.
What a cool
And then
adventure.
we came back, and then he always said, like, I want a family and I want to support the family. And if I have to do theater on the side or direct or act or whatever, but I can't live without it. Mm-hmm. And I think he really felt like this co-creator, like with God. Like he felt like God gave me these gifts and talents. Like I have to use them. It's not like superfluous. It's not just like,
Mm-hmm.
And
it's
so he's like,
right?
yes. And so he's like, if I have to have 2 jobs for the rest of my life or work is just as hard just to do this, then it's worth it. And and so that was his attitude of like, I think he just always assumed like a lot of people have, a different perception of God. And Chris's perception of God is how I see God now, which is he wants me to succeed. He gave me these gifts, so he's going to help me do it. I don't know how it's going to work out, but it will, because things always work out for me. Mm-hmm. And I realize that's ironic saying that he died, but things did work out for him. Like, and he was the guy that was like, I feel like George Bailey. Like he is typing this in his with his eyes because he can't move or speak, and he's typing. He's like, I feel the last 2 years of his life, I feel like the luckiest man on earth. Look at how much people love us. Look at how our friends are showing up for us. Look at how our family are like, I'm the luckiest man in the world. And I remember like my friend being like, yeah, you're lucky. Look at you. He's like, no, I really like, yeah, this happened to me, but this wasn't my fault. This was a mix of like some causation and genetic predisposition that I don't know what caused it, but I didn't do it on purpose. This was like God's plan for me, but it doesn't negate all the great things that I have. He was like obsessed with his kids, with me, with his friends, like, and he attributed that to like God, a clear path. It didn't go wrong. This is exactly what it was. And so I think it was that like this partnership with God,
mm-hmm. So
if
beautiful.
like when I hit something, when I don't know what's going to happen or what's next, I know that God will be there, and he testified of that. He talked about it. He talked about Christ. He really wanted his funeral. He planned it all out. And he's like, I want it all to talk about Christ at my funeral. I want, that's what I want. Mm-hmm. And I know that there were some people who were like, his funeral wasn't very funny. And I'm like, no, it wasn't funny. That's right. But it is what he wanted,
Yeah, this is not about you.
Yeah, I feel like that confidence came from that. He took one day before school started, and it took the whole day to type out individual blessings, like back to school blessings for each one of the kids.
Oh, that's so cool.
And I remember it was like 6:00 at night, and I was like, okay, we're ready. And he's like, I'm not quite done. I want to do one each for the kids, and I'm praying about it and stuff. Like he did stuff like that was mindful. He read his scriptures. He was Paul in the Bible videos. Like he did those things not out of guilt and stuff, but because it was like that thread he was following.
Mm-hmm. Let me read something. This reminds me of Chris, what you're saying. If you ask, why is this happening? No light may come. But if you ask, how am I to glorify God now? There will always be an answer.
Yeah. I think he found that. I think in the first year, it was the struggle of, I want to ask for a specific miracle, and I have the faith that God can give me this miracle. And when you ask for a miracle that you want more than anything that you've ever wanted in your whole life, and I know because I asked for that miracle, and the answer is no. Not I didn't get an answer, or maybe later, but the answer is no. That will shift your faith, because you're thinking, this is a really good thing that I'm asking for. I'm not even, this will do good. This is not selfish. This is like, there's no conceivable reason why, and I have the faith for this. Or if I don't, give me more. I know I can ask for it, I think it really shifted things, and especially for Chris too, because when we had that conversation after about a year of saying, okay, so if this is what I've been asked to do, that now what? Then how can I keep creating, keep teaching, influencing others, keep being a great husband and father and friend? A lot of people don't know this, but he would wake up every day, especially the last 2-3 years, and he said, my prayer was always, who can I help today? Like, just tell me one person that I can help today. It's during a pandemic. You can't move. You can't speak. And he's like, every day somebody would come to my mind, every day. And he would text someone. He would FaceTime them. He would tell them to come and get him for lunch, like whatever it was. And he would make that bid, and he would follow on it. And then more and more came. And after he died, I can't tell you how many like letters, like handwritten letters I got, and notes and emails, two in particular that were a surprise to me, that said, he saved my life. He doesn't know this, but I want to tell you that he reached out to me. He talked to me, and in varying, capacities of his life, and like took me under his wing at a certain time, or I was making a plan to end my life, and Christopher could see I was struggling and invited me in his office, or this happened or that. Like it's like you hear things like that, but when it really happens and you know the person, you just think he was trying to do that, and nothing would mean more to him than that. Nothing would mean more. And during the pandemic, when everything was shut down, and he asked his friends to come and entertain him, in front of our window. We have these 3 big glass windows in front of our house. He's like, I will be sitting in front of my windows from the hours of 1 to 4 every day if anyone wants to come and entertain me. And I think that was his way of, I know I can't see my friends, I can't talk to them, but I want to create a good, fun memory for them, and I need it too. And that created some of my very favorite moments of my whole life. And
people can't. I know
my
they
whole
can.
life. I would have to excuse myself sometimes. Like, oh my gosh, that's so funny. I'd excuse myself and go back into my bedroom and just cry, because I just felt like my heart would burst. I felt so much love, for our friends and family. Like, isn't that how we're supposed to live? Like all the time.
I think so. Oh my gosh.
It's amazing.
It is amazing, and he's incredibly inspiring. So he passes. What do you do next? I want to know more. Like, were you mad at God? I mean,
no. And I kind of thought maybe I would. A lot of my friends were like, it's okay if you're mad. And I thought, I know it is, but I wasn't. Is that weird? Isn't that weird? I mean, still think it's weird.
Yeah.
I wasn't mad
because
I was so grateful.
Wow.
I felt, especially for the first 2 weeks, I felt like this, and a lot of people I think experience this just high, this overwhelming of, I'm so proud of him, and I'm so lucky that I got to know him better than anyone else. What a privilege. And that I got to raise a family with him. I just felt so much love, and I was just so proud for him. And then when that wore off, that high of wore off, it was really a hard crash. And then for the following few months, I just thought, oh, this is torture. This is actually the definition of hell, of being separated by the person that you love the most. And I thought I did a good job, and I took care of him. And so then why is this my reward? Kind of thing. Yeah. You really do bargain. Grief is that's an entirely different podcast. But, so I don't want to give the illusion that it was like, oh, I felt so great because he was so great.
It seems,
but I felt so proud of him, and I felt so much love. And just thought, it's interesting. One of my dearest friends, right after he was diagnosed, and I was having a really hard time, and just sobbing to her, and just being like, I don't know what I'm going to do, and I don't know what's going to happen, and how can I do this? And she said to me, I just got to ask you a question. It's just between you and me. If you could go back and do it again and meet Chris Clark and marry him and do it, knowing what you know now, would you do it? And I said, absolutely, 100%. She's like, well, then there you go.
Oh
there you go.
Wow.
There you go.
Gosh.
And I was like, well, what if I had said the other thing? She's like, then there you go. And we would have dealt with it. She's like, but you have to know that going forward. And when he died, I remembered her asking me that years ago. And I remember thinking like, I chose this and I'm so glad I did. So I didn't have any regrets that way. And that felt really, it still does feel very empowering.
That's incredible.
I was so glad that she pointed my attention to that because I wouldn't have thought about that at the time.
No.
Because I'm like, of course I would in a heartbeat. And I still say that. And so then it's not like it takes away the pain, but it gives it meaning for me.
So I'm in my 40s.
Yes.
You in your 40s?
I'm in my 40s.
Okay. So it's weird. Since we got to this age, it seems like just people die. It's like a thing now.
It's going to happen more and more to our immediate groups.
I've lost an uncle and one of my best friends from college, and then another college friend all this year. And it's like we're at the age where people are dying, and this is a reality now. It's like it's just different. It's different. Like people move on, and life is extremely fragile and beautiful, and it's beautiful because it's so fragile. There will be more people dying.
Yeah.
What would you want to say to the people out there who might not expect anything, but they can start enjoying their life now? Because I watch you and you do enjoy your life.
I try.
Well, I think you do. You're one of the most joyful people that I know. I mean, at least you put on that face. I mean,
thanks.
But I suspect it's real. I know you better than just.
It is real. It is. I'm a lot of things.
You're being very humble right now. My favorite movie is About Time. Do you know this movie?
Oh, that movie kills me.
It kills me.
And I love it, and I watch it all the time. And I identify with the mother when he comes to her.
I'm not interested.
And I'm just not interested in living in a world where your father's not in it.
Yeah.
And I watched that soon after, and I just thought, oh, never have I identified with anybody more.
Yeah, that movie.
Everyone
needs to watch that movie.
That one little scene. But I will tell you this.
Tell me.
Because Chris and I talked about everything at the end, and he would say, he was really sweet, and he'd be like, I'm not worried about the kids because you're a great mom. And I was like, thank you. But also our kids they're great. They're doing really well. And it hasn't always been the case. He's like, I'm just worried about you. And I go, you know what? I am worried about me too. Because it was like, there was this big, like black, like curtain of life after Chris. Like I was so worried about like making him comfortable and making sure my kids were okay and how things were going to go that if I thought about like, well, what will I do after Chris dies? I was like, not interested in thinking about it. I in fact, my brain wouldn't really do it. And I said something offhanded to Chris, like, oh, I'll probably just stay in bed and cry all day. And that's where I'll live. And he's like, I can't tell if you're kidding or not. And I go, I actually don't know if I'm kidding or not, like honest. And he said to me, well, you can do whatever you want, but just know that you don't honor me by being miserable. You don't honor our love or our life together. If you did that, that is a discredit for the love and the life that we had together. And I felt a little like chastised and rebuked. He was like, I don't know if you're kidding, but like, you better not be kidding. He's like, that would not honor like our family, our kids. And I was like, well, I don't want to do it. Like, I was like, settle down. I just said, well, just don't. I would always say, just don't die. And then we don't have to worry about it. But I think about that all the time. Because of course I have those days and sometimes those weeks where I'm like, I just kind of hate everything. I'm done, But I know that I won't always feel that way. And I also know that Chris, that is not honoring Chris. He was like, you need to live. He's like, this, none of us know how much time we have. You know that it matters, our relationships, how we treat people, all this stuff. Like you know now, so you can't like live like you don't know.
Gosh, he's a sage.
I know. And I hate that he was right about it. He was like, wanting us all to move forward. Like he would tell the kids, I want you to go back to school. Like, I don't want you to be like, well, my dad died, so now I can't go live my dreams. Now I can't finish school. Like, it's okay.
He was building you all up. He made a culture that's like, we don't do this. You're going to live. Wow. What a cool guy. Gosh.
I mean, who does that? But we should all live that way. So like, back to your question, I'm sorry, and I keep going on tangents, but I love talking to you. Yeah. It's this idea of living we are not just meant to endure life. We are living with joy. And if I feel bad for myself, I let myself feel bad, of course. I'm a human. But I also think, like, Chris couldn't move or talk. And he's still like, we laughed more than we cried. We laughed really, really hard. So much so that I really wish I was still taking care of him. Like, he wasn't a burden. Like, the way that you think life is going to be and the actual reality that you can create are different. You have a lot more influence than you think. And the people around you and who you surround, like, make all the difference for that. And he showed me that. And I do feel like I get these moments of a real, like, internal thrill when I think, oh, Chris would be so proud of me for doing this thing that was scary or that put me outside of my comfort zone or whatever. He'd be so proud of me. It's a great way to live.
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much. You can share whatever you want, but I just want, like, what is your final thought that you want to express to our brothers and sisters out there that might be going through a hard time?
Okay. Oof. I have a couple of friends who are going through some really, really awful things right now. So I'm trying to, what was most helpful for me is that to recognize that, yes, grief is a part of life. It's part of our experience. No one can escape it. But like you started, we underestimate how much it will knock out of us, right? And I don't think anyone would have faulted Chris or myself for becoming jaded or depressed and not wanting. No one would have faulted him at all.
Yeah.
And yet, through that, I think we can unknowingly limit the goodness and the love and the joy that is available to us. And I when I was in my darkest, and sometimes I still visit there, I just don't live there, but I still visit there. In my darkest moments, I remember the goodness of God and how that relationship that you can have with God of saying, not only do I know that you're all knowing and all powerful, but I know that you're actively working for my good and in my favor, and I will assume the best. And just because I don't understand it and my brain doesn't comprehend it doesn't mean that it's not true. It just means that I haven't imagined it yet. Or it hasn't been revealed to me, however you want to do it. And the thing that gets me out of grief, for those who are going through a hard time, you might want to try this too. I hope it will be helpful, is to think about the creativity of God. And the thing that I love about creativity is that it brings up ideas that you've never thought about before, that you've never imagined, that you didn't think was possible, and opens your mind to something new. And I really do think that that's where hope is born. And when you're going through a hard time, you need hope. And in those moments that you don't have hope, those are the moments that you think you'll never escape. And so you can create that kind of hope, and it sort of feeds on, this connection with others. I really believe in the collaborative power of creativity, that you just don't just do it in a vacuum by yourself, but that you can be a co-creator with God, with your friends, with family, with your children in your home, wherever it is. And I know that's sort of a weird answer, but for me, that is what made sense to me when I saw, in the midst of extreme suffering of my husband and my children, and I saw them creating and laughing and connecting like that, and creating pure joy. It was, oh, this is going to be the worst, most horrible time of our lives. Is it? It wasn't. It should have been, but it wasn't. It was joyful. And so just allow yourself to be wrong. Allow your mind to be opened, and how your relationship can change with God. Because, when you find yourself feeling very, very alone, that nobody understands you, and we all feel that way, God is there. He never removes himself from us. We don't have to prove any sort of worthiness or any credentials. And that changes your faith too. And it gives you that kind of confidence. So that's a sort of roundabout reason how I would say how to create hope. And
well, I'm very grateful for it. It made sense.
Okay, I hope it does.
And you're rad. And
you're rad.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
If you like this episode, make sure you subscribe. And if you're looking for more ways to include God throughout your day, Check out some of my recent music I created in partnership with Skylight. Link in the description.